Welcome to the most honest podcast on the internet about UFOs, CIA secrets, and the 2027 UFO landing timeline. Wow. Okay, even just saying that line, it still kind of gives me chills. We are diving deep today, you and I, into something really mind-bending.
Totally. UFOs, government secrecy. It's a deep rabbit hole.
And we've got this really fascinating angle, right? Through the eyes of a former CIA officer. Direct experience.
Exactly. That's what makes this deep dive so compelling, I think. We're not just, guessing here.
Right.
We're digging into what John Ramirez, who actually worked there, a retired CIA officer, shared recently. He was on podcast UFO live shows.
So this gives us a real sort of inside peek into how the CIA has actually dealt with this whole phenomenon over the years.
Yeah, their historical involvement, but also what's still going on. It's quite something.
Oh, okay, let's get into it then. This isn't some niche thing they glanced at once. The CIA had a serious long-term interest.
Oh, absolutely. Right from the get-go, according to Ramirez. He said various CIA offices had these accounts for analysis, and the UFO account was one of them.
An account, like a file, a research area.
Pretty much, a designated topic for ongoing study. And it wasn't a flash in the pan. He actually traced it through all these different organizational changes inside the agency.
Like where?
Well, it started, he said, with the Office of Scientific Intelligence. Then it shifted to the Scientific Intelligence Branch, then back to the Office of Scientific Intelligence again. Different divisions held on to it over time.
Huh, so it was always kind of simmering somewhere within the agency, just maybe under different names or offices?
Precisely.
Yeah.
It never just vanished. It kept going. Later, it was part of the Office of Scientific and Weapons Research.
Okay, weapons research. That sounds serious.
And then its successor, WINPAC. The Weapons Intelligence Non-Proliferation and Arms Control Center. The people looking at advanced weapons and tech proliferation.
And get this, you won't believe it. Ramirez says the study continues now, today, in the office that followed WINPAC.
That's right, the Weapons and Counterproliferation Mission Center. So that whole idea that, the government stopped caring after Project Blue Book.
Totally wrong. Debunked.
Completely.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really interesting is where within that center they're looking at it.
Yeah.
The parts focused on airborne stuff, air defense, air warfare, and naval systems.
Naval systems. Okay, hang on. Why naval? That sounds specific.
Well, think about it. What's one of the key things we hear about these UAPs?
They go in the water. That Transmedium thing.
Exactly. The ability to move between air and water seamlessly. If you're analyzing threats, especially, say, from enemy submarines.
Oh, okay. An unknown object doing that. That's a whole different ballgame. It messes with all the standard categories.
Right. It blurs the lines. So from a purely national security angle, continuing to study these things, especially their transmedium capability, makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's not just about, wondering if aliens exist. It's about understanding potential capabilities that could be a threat, regardless of origin.
Precisely. Now, speaking of deep secrets, Ramirez told this story about being denied access to a Navy program.
Right, and this was after he had super high clearances, like Q clearance for nuclear stuff, crypto for codes.
Yeah, top-level access. But
Okay.
still, for this one Navy program, nope, door shut.
He said it was the most compartmented thing he'd ever encountered. Compared it to the Manhattan Project.
The Manhattan Project, that tells you the level of secrecy we're potentially talking about here. It's staggering.
And his guess for why he was blocked?
His UFO interest.
Just his hobby?
Well, apparently it was documented. In his security checks, they noted his hobbies, the conferences he went to, listening to Coast AM. It was all in his file.
Even though he told the CIA he was doing this stuff, the External Activities Branch knew?
Yeah, they knew, and they permitted it, as a private citizen. But the guy running this specific Navy program, apparently he got spooked. Didn't feel comfortable reading Ramirez in, likely because of that public-facing interest.
Wow. Makes you really wonder what was in that program, doesn't it?
Definitely. Ramirez speculated maybe it had something to do with those transmedium vehicles. Maybe even recovered materials being sent to defense contractors.
But then there's the money question. Congressional oversight.
That's always the tricky part with these deep black programs, isn't it? Generally, yeah, Congress oversees taxpayer money.
But there are loopholes.
Well, sort of.
Mm.
If a company develops something with its own money, it's proprietary tech, or if the government just gives them existing equipment, GFE, government-furnished equipment, maybe for like $1.
Then the direct link to ongoing taxpayer funding gets blurry.
Exactly. And that can create these pockets of extreme secrecy where standard oversight might not reach as easily.
Yeah, the layers. Okay, so if it's that secret, what about the very top? Does the president even know everything?
Ramirez seemed to agree with Chris Mellon on this. Presidents are eligible to know, sure, but
There's eligibility, and then there's need to know. Big difference.
huge difference. Compartmentalization is key. Ramirez himself was a CKNGOR, a compartment access program control officer for some decades-long technical operation. Every single president since that operation started was on the bigot list. They knew it existed
Yeah.
at a high level,
But not necessarily the nuts and bolts, just this thing is happening.
pretty much. Which makes you think about those interviews, right?
Mm.
Obama on Kimmel,
Right.
Trump, they both hinted knowing stuff.
Yeah, that body language,
Yeah.
especially Obama, like he was holding something back.
Totally. I remember Obama saying, they do not want us to talk about them.
Yeah. Who's they?
Well, Ramirez had this really interesting take. He wondered if they wasn't the government.
The beings themselves, the non-human entities.
That was his interpretation, that maybe they are controlling the pace of disclosure to some
Yeah.
extent.
Oh.
And he pointed out, these craft seem perfectly capable of showing up whenever they want, regardless of what any government tries to hide.
That shifts the whole power dynamic, doesn't it? Okay, so if the president doesn't know it all and it's all siloed, what about the agencies? Does anyone have the whole picture?
Doesn't sound like it. Ramirez described the intelligence community as, well, divided by what they do. Their functional missions.
Like?
Like NSA handles the signals, the electromagnetic stuff. NGA gets the photos, the videos, especially from space. NRO runs the satellite, so they might see things, but it's not their main job.
And others.
DIA does Mission measurement and signature intelligence. That's the non-signals, non-imagery stuff. Radiological, chemical.
Yeah.
They were involved at Skinwalker Ranch, apparently.
Right. Skinwalker. And the CIA.
Traditionally human intelligence, right? Human
Yeah.
authority. But historically, their Office of Scientific Intelligence, even the Life Sciences Division, they were interested. Biologists looking into it.
So everyone has their little piece of the puzzle. Who does Ramirez think has the most visual evidence, though?
He suggested NGA, probably, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, because they're the ones analyzing all that imagery from space.
Which makes sense. So if these things are coming from way out there, deep space, how would we even detect them?
Well, we have tools looking out, like the James Webb Telescope, way out there. But
most of our intelligence satellites are looking down at Earth, right? Geosynchronous, EO, MEO.
exactly. Their primary job is Earth observation. For deep space, you need astronomical instruments, probes. The intel community is mostly focused on what's happening here or near here.
Okay, so where are they from? That's the big one. Is it just aliens from Zeta Reticuli? Ramirez seemed to lean towards other ideas.
Oh, yeah, definitely. He floated some really thought-provoking stuff, like, what if they aren't visitors? What if they've been here longer than us?
Whoa, like we're the newcomers on their planet.
Kind of flips the script, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And he mentioned the idea they might have influenced human development, that maybe we look like them.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack. Any other theories he mentioned?
Yeah, he brought up Dr. Michael Masters' idea, the exotempestrial model, that they're us, but from the future. Evolved humans,
Time travelers.
basically. And then there's interdimensional, or ultraterrestrial-like, living inside the Earth, or on the Moon, or Mars, just hidden.
So not necessarily from across the galaxy, maybe closer to home, just different.
Right. Or maybe they're what people used to call gods, angels, messengers, different interpretations throughout history.
And he mentioned the nuclear connection, Stan Freeman's idea.
Yeah, the kids found the box of matches analogy. That things really ramped up after we detonated the first atomic bombs in 1945. Like we suddenly got their attention in a new way.
That ties into what Lou Elizondo hints at too, right? This long-term presence.
Exactly. It all paints a picture of something much more complex and long-lasting than just recent alien visitations.
Speaking of Elizondo, Ramirez had a specific take on him. Not a whistleblower.
Yeah, he sees Elizondo's role differently. More like someone with an official function, maybe unofficial, but definitely a function.
Doing what?
Pushing the envelope. Expanding the sandbox, Ramirez called it. Testing the waters, seeing what the public can handle, carefully saying things he's likely authorized to say,
Right.
while respecting his NDAs.
Like planting seeds.
Kind of. Trying to shift the conversation, maybe prepare people. Elizondo himself admits he knows things he can't share, things that would change how people think. Ramirez seems to see that as part of a deliberate, managed process.
Interesting. A managed release, maybe? Okay, the cover-up itself. Is it like an agreement, or are they forced to keep quiet?
Ramirez laid out this hypothetical based on Roswell. Imagine crash, surviving being, contact, maybe more arrivals. leading to that alleged Eisenhower meeting at Holman Air Force Base.
The supposed meeting.
Right, and the hypothetical deal. We get some tech insights, maybe, in exchange for keeping their existence secret?
The quid pro.
Potentially. But he also suggested if the U.S. manages to develop similar tech on its own, maybe that weakens the need or the ability to enforce that secrecy.
The leverage changes.
Could be. He sort of sees the whole post-1947 period as two phases. Phase 1, deny everything while secretly studying it. Phase 2, where we are now, maybe acknowledging the phenomena are real, the UAPs, but still not admitting contact or cooperation.
And full disclosure would be?
Telling us who they are, where they're from, and what their relationship is with us, with humanity. That's the core secret, he thinks.
Beyond just secrecy, could they be influencing world events, not just preventing nuclear war, maybe?
He didn't seem to think they were micromanaging human politics or conflicts, not dictating policy day to day.
But maybe stepping in at critical moments, like the nuclear close calls.
That seemed to be his view. The Maelstrom Air Force Base incident, stories about Soviet missile sites, preventing self-annihilation might be their main intervention point.
Like planetary guardians almost, silent ones.
Potentially. He mentioned that Maelstrom incident, March 67, multiple missile silos going offline just before Johnson and Kasagian were talking arms reduction. The timing is suggestive.
It really is. Okay, shifting gears slightly. Drone technology. You'd think the CIA would be all over collecting technical details on foreign drones.
Surprisingly, Ramirez said no. Not the CIA's job, apparently.
Really? Whose job is it then?
He broke it down. The actual drone, the physical thing, Air Force, Space Force, they track airborne vehicles, space situational awareness.
What about how it looks on radar or infrared, the signatures?
That's NGA, Air Force, Space Force again.
And the signals controlling it.
NSA,
Good.
Signals Intelligence.
So where does the CIA fit in with drones?
Human intelligence. Finding out intentions that they're planning to launch one. Recruiting skies to get information before it flies. That's their lane.
Got it. Each agency sticks to its specialty. What about these reports of, like, highways in the sky or big swarms of UAPs? Is that a real pattern?
Ramirez acknowledged there are definitely regional flaps, concentrated sightings. The southwest U.S. is a classic hotspot, Phoenix, Tucson, near the labs in New Mexico.
Yeah, you hear about that area a lot.
And he mentioned Cheryl Costa's work, tracking sightings geographically. Turns out they're pretty widespread, not just in a few famous places.
Did he have any personal sightings?
He mentioned a UFO tour in Sedona with Melinda Leslie. Using night vision, they saw something moving in ways that just didn't follow normal physics. Defying Kepler's laws, he said.
Wow. But he also had a more normal experience.
Yeah, with Ben Hansen, where something they thought was a UFO turned out to just be a bat. So, important to stay grounded, too.
Absolutely. Misidentification happens. He suggested the recent Navy videos might be popping up more because they have better sensors now, seeing in different parts of the spectrum.
That was his thought, yeah.
Yeah.
New tech reveals things that were maybe always there, just invisible to older systems.
Okay, now for something a bit darker. The Collins Elite. What's the story there?
This is supposedly a group, maybe within the Pentagon, that Ramirez mentioned. Their alleged goal, to paint the phenomenon as demonic or satanic, to suppress any space brothers, benevolent notions, play on religious fears, basically frame it as an invasion, something evil to be fought.
And does Ramirez think this is real, that people in charge actually believe this?
He seemed to think so, yes. That some people, maybe even senior people, genuinely hold these religious interpretations and see UAPs or their occupants as demonic entities. He even mentioned Lou Elizondo had a superior who thought that way.
That's disturbing. Using religion to shape policy on something potentially world-changing.
It adds another layer of complexity and potential conflict to the whole situation.
Definitely. Okay, let's circle back to the big one from the intro, the 2027 timeline. A mass UFO landing. Is that a real possibility?
Ramirez talked about it more as a personal hope, maybe, that something like that would happen by 2027 to force full disclosure, like the entities themselves just show up.
How does he think people would react?
In the U.S. media frenzy, biggest story ever, but also chaos. Conflicting views, some saying it's demonic, others saying it's CGI, fake news, and sadly, probably violence and hostility based on our sci-fi and just human nature sometimes.
Fear of the unknown.
Exactly. But he also wondered if maybe the recent government activity, the legislation, the reports, maybe that's all part of preparing the public.
Like a slow acclimatization process, starting around 2017 maybe, leading up to something around 2027, a 10-year window.
It's a theory. It fits with some things, like Lou Elizondo's comment about needing a hobby for 5 years. That comment was made around 2022, pointing towards 2027.
And did Ramirez himself have any official insight into 2027?
He hinted at it. He said he heard about the 2027 time frame in an official capacity, but couldn't say more, which is tantalizing, right? Suggests there's some internal chatter about it, maybe even a sense of urgency to get ready.
That's pretty wild, a potential deadline. Okay, what about the current UAP report we're waiting on? Does he know anything about its status?
He said he didn't have specific current inside info, just noted that the Pentagon has been briefing the press on bits, and Congress has seen some evidence, photos, videos.
He wasn't impressed with the last one, the preliminary assessment.
No, he thought it was poorly written. He expects the real report is probably classified, and maybe we'll get an unclassified summary.
Who decides what gets released? Congress.
No, the executive branch.
Where?
ODNI, Director of National Intelligence, and the Department of Defense. They hold the cards on release.
And they might not agree. DOD versus ODNI.
Could be. Ramirez suggested DOD might be less keen on sharing than ODNI. Plus, he mentioned a big mandate coming up next year. Research has to go back to the 1940s. That could uncover a lot.
Going back to the beginning, potentially. Yeah. Wow. So stripping it all back, why hide it for so long? What's the ultimate reason?
Ramirez's take is interesting. He thinks it's less about, are aliens real? That's almost a side issue, a scientific one.
So what is the core secret?
The technology. Specifically, exploiting crash tech for human military or other uses. That's the crown jewel they want to protect.
And maybe help from the occupants in figuring it out.
That's the even deeper layer he hinted at. If there was help or collaboration, that's almost impossible to disclose. So the real secret isn't just that they exist. It's about the relationship, the interaction, maybe even their influence on us.
That we look like them idea again.
Right. That's the kind of thing that stays hidden. He thinks the government is now okay talking about sightings, the UAPs themselves.
Not who's driving them or where they're from.
Exactly. And he warned about parsing their language carefully when they say no evidence of extraterrestrials in a report.
They might mean in that specific report's time frame or no direct contact by the military pilots in those specific incidents.
Precisely. Or the fact the UAP task force only looked at data from late 2004 onwards. It conveniently excludes decades of history, like Maelstrom. It's about what they don't say sometimes.
Very clever. Okay, this makes me think about those weird CIA Pentagon projects. Stargate, Gateway, any connection there to UAPs?
Yeah, he clarified some things. Gateway is actually from the Monroe Institute, not CIA. But Stargate was a real CIA DAO remote viewing program. The Army called theirs Center Lane.
And did they remote view UAPs?
Apparently, yes. That was one of the targets. He mentioned people like Mal Riley supposedly viewing a galactic federation and Joe McMonigle viewing Mars and its inhabitants.
Remote viewing aliens and spaceships. Seriously.
That's what was reported, yeah. He also touched on these ideas, maybe unverified, that some craft have no propulsion we can see, that they're controlled by consciousness.
Like mind-powered ships?
Kind of. He even told a story about someone named Drunvalo Melchizedek, supposedly being asked to fly one using meditation techniques, Merkaba protocols. Wild stuff.
Definitely out there. If Ramirez knows all this, would he tell Congress if they asked? Is he allowed?
He said yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
His CIA NDAs don't cover UAPs.
Yeah.
So if he got a subpoena or an invitation, he's free to testify.
Did he ever get asked to join the official UAP groups?
He mentioned declining an opportunity to be formally read into the ORG working group, probably the official task force, specifically because he wanted to keep his freedom to speak publicly about it.
That's quite a statement. Choosing public discourse over inside access.
Shows his commitment to getting the information out there, I suppose.
One last worry people always raise. If the truth came out, especially something like they created us or heavily influenced us, would it cause, religious chaos? Is that why they hide it?
Ramirez had a different take. He thinks the U.S., at least, is pretty secular now. He doubts it would cause widespread religious chaos.
More like economic or social disruption.
Yeah, potentially market instability, people questioning reality. That seems more likely to him. He also thought people with Eastern or indigenous beliefs might actually handle it better, be more accepting.
Interesting perspective. Okay, before we wrap up, you mentioned that hotel conference Ramirez attended. Can you give us the details on that? It sounded significant.
Oh, absolutely. It was quite a story. He got invited by a colleague in the Science and Technology Directorate at the CIA. This colleague knew Ramirez was into UFOs. They'd worked together on visualization tech before.
So an internal invitation, where was it?
A Marriott hotel in Tysons Corner, Virginia. Just a regular conference room on the mezzanine level, he said. No obvious security.
And who was there?
He signed in name, phone, CIA email. He noticed most other emails were .edu, so lots of academics. He recognized his colleague and one other person from his own office, probably OSWR back then.
What was actually discussed? Was it classified?
No, the agenda was unclassified. The topics were things like CIA's history with UFOs since Roswell, CIA interest in alien DNA, future IT. He even kept his phone, a Motorola StarTAC.
Alien DNA. Wow. Tell me more.
Yeah, a briefer, apparently from the CIA history staff, talked about how the agency publicly downplayed UFOs after the 52 DC sightings, but secretly kept studying them.
The two-track approach.
Right. They explained how U-2 spy planes were often mistaken for UFOs in the 50s. But, and this is key, the briefer admitted about 10% of sightings weren't U-2s or A-12s. He specifically mentioned the 1950 McMinnville photo as a real, undebunked UFO.
Okay, that's a big admission, even internally. What about the DNA part?
The briefer said CIA had been interested in alien DNA since after WWII, maybe linked to Roswell recovery medical analysis. They were looking for specific DNA sequences in humans that seemed similar to recovered material.
Looking for it where?
Focused on certain family lines, apparently showing enhancements in the Northeast U.S., like New England, and also overseas.
Enhancements, like genetic upgrades.
Sounds like it. And here's a kicker. The briefer revealed a CIA program that used a real overseas vaccination campaign as a cover to secretly collect DNA samples for this research.
Using vaccinations as a cover for DNA harvesting. That's shocking.
Yeah. Ramirez said he kept the agenda and sign-in sheet until he retired, then got rid of them. He mentioned the audience just listened attentively, took notes, didn't seem surprised, like maybe this wasn't news to them.
Familiarity. That suggests these ideas were circulating within certain circles for a long time.
Seems that way. And the briefer, being from the history staff, makes sense they'd have access to old intelligence records.
What an incredible story. It really gives you a sense of the depth and history of the CIA's involvement way beyond the public narrative.
Absolutely. It connects a lot of dots, doesn't it?
It really does. When you put it all together, the long history, the secrecy, the Navy program, Elizondo, the 2027 Whispers, this conference, what stands out most to you now?
For me, it's that consistency. The fact that this hasn't gone away, the interest persists, the questions persist, the secrecy persists, and maybe, just maybe, we're approaching some kind of inflection point.
Yeah, it definitely feels different now. Which brings us back to you, listening right now. What do you take away from all this?
It really forces you to ask, doesn't it? If even half of this is true, the decades of hidden study, the hints of contact, the possibility of something big happening soon, what does that mean for your understanding of the world? What assumptions might need a serious rethink?
Heavy questions, but important ones. Thank you for going down this rabbit hole with us today.
Always fascinating to explore these topics.
See you soon.